Hey gamers, this is Liz Davidson from Beyond Solitaire, and I'm here with Mitch Reed from No Dice, No Glory. How you doing, Mitch?
What's up, Liz? Good morning.
I personally am doing great because we are here with Marcel Kohler. He is a Zenobia Award finalist and the designer of Orange Shall Overcome. How you doing, Marcel?
Hi, I'm doing great. It's afternoon here, so yeah, but have a great morning to you guys as well.
And so why don't we start with the basics? Tell us about your game.
Yeah, so it's a cooperative scenario-based game, which means I'm trying to focus. So it's about the Dutch resistance during the Second World War. Maybe that's also good to add at the start. So I try to really put all the theme in that element. One of the things also that I think makes it interesting that I sort of decided halfway when I was designing it, that it's really focused on non-violent resistance. So you're not killing anyone, you're not, but you also don't get killed. Like you can get arrested, then you lose the game. But that's sort of after what happens after. That's not really part of the game. To keep it a bit more easy for people to understand. I'm trying to put a lot of things in there that happened, like scenarios are based all on specific things the Dutch resistance did. So every scenario focuses a little bit on a different thing. But I'm trying not to force it on people. Like if people think, okay, I just like the mechanisms, then it's also fine. Like some of the cards on the backside, you can read bios because all the characters you're playing are real people. So some of them are still alive. 2 of them actually are still alive. So I could ask them, is it okay to have in the game? I got consent from everybody, which is nice. And another one is my grandmother. So that's also how it started as well. So yeah, that's maybe sort of in short, it's like a bit of resource management, pick up and deliver kind of game, but I'm trying to do it with a bit of a different approach and different elements to it as well.
Yeah, one of the things I was going to bring up is your familial ties to it. So Truth in Advertising. So everybody out there knows I got to judge this game twice. It's kind of why I wore the orange shirt. No, not really. It was top, but I'm glad I wore the orange shirt. But
it's good.
As you heard about the award and you wanted to, actually, let's go even further back. As you thought about producing the game, how strong was the fact that your family has ties to the game matter? Did it kind of lead you down this path to make this game?
Yeah, so actually my grandmother, she passed away 4 years ago, which is roughly like she was 99. So she was like 21 when the war started, or 21. So she had very sort of vivid memories. Well, like if you're young, it's like, yeah, my parents did this, or my grandparents, but like, yeah, I did this. She only talked about the war in the last few years of her life after her husband died or passed away. And I started to work at the Resistance Museum at the same time, or roughly, as a volunteer in Amsterdam. And then I realized there's comics, there's movies, of course, books, but no real modern board games. And I started designing fantasy board games before, but then since I'm a historian, I studied history. I got a master's degree in Holocaust and genocide studies. So really focused on that era. And then I thought, why not try to combine those two into a great thematic game where people can learn a bit, but at the same time, just have a fun night. And yeah, instead of watching a movie, they can actually make their own choices, because that's one of the things I think that makes a game different from a movie. You actually have to make the choices and deal with the consequences. So, but yeah, for example, the hat is from my grandfather, so I often wear it when I go somewhere connected to my game, like on conventions sometimes.
Well, it's a good looking hat too.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, at least I'm not sure if it's from the 40s or 50s, but could have been indeed from, like, it's around that period. So yeah, and it's fitted, which also helps. I have another one that doesn't really fit well on my head, but this one does. So yeah, happy with that as well.
So did you have to do a lot of additional research for your game, or was it basically something that you had already done because of past interests? What did the game do to kind of build on what you already were doing?
Well, the interesting thing to it is because I'm using only, yeah, as I just mentioned before, I use only people who are actually have done some kind of resistance work, and I try to have a very diverse group. in that as well, with age, and like half of the characters are female, half of them are men, so that you can really choose someone that you feel like you could sort of connect with a bit. But to make sure that their special abilities that every character has fitted with that person, I needed to do quite a bit of research, mostly on the people. But even that, like my studies mostly dealt with what happened with the people after they were captured, like if they go to a concentration camps or things like that, or when they're arrested, and not really what happens like with the actual resistance work they were doing. And since I wanted to make sure it's correct, it took quite a bit of I'm reading some of the biographies from some of the people who wrote a biography, just to try to understand how were these people before the war, and if they survived the war, what did they potentially do after the war. Some of them didn't survive the war, so it's also like it's a bit of a way to try to honor them. And then I think it's best if I have the right information or the right background for it, like if I could tell it in the way that fitted with these people. And I think that's
I thought the research was amazing from the first time I looked at it. It's really sound, and I love the personal connection you have. So taking something that is I'm going to go out on a limb, that's near and dear to you. How hard was it to gamify that?
Good question. I think one of the things I try to do, though, even though like I don't want the game to be like, okay, you play only my grandmother. I want it's a basis in a way, and it's a way for me to explain why I'm making the game and why it's very important to me indeed. But it's like if you played always the game without my grandmother, it's not like it's unbalanced or whatever. It's not a mandatory thing or anything. So I try to balance those two a bit. Like people, if they don't know about that it's my grandmother, basically you would not even know in the game. Like she has a different last name because it's from my mother's side, so you would not even know connected directly to me. So it's I think it didn't really play a big role, but trying to find the right way for the actual mechanisms to feel like the resistance was, well, many iterations in a way. It was I started off, but some things are still sort of the same, which I'm sort of surprised about, but others changed quite a bit in a good way, I think. And I sort of started with a bit of a Dead of Winter kind of feel that I wanted that game to have, where people often say like, okay, this is a game with zombies, but not a zombie game kind of feel. And this I wanted to like, it's a game where the war is the background. So if people say it's a war game, which you might think if you see the art or whatever, it's like, no, it's not the typical war game kind of feel, because it's more of a cooperative game about like, I am someone and I have to do these things as this person, and not really about the war. As I said, there's no killing or anything, but and there are Germans, of course, that occupy parts of the board, and there is also Dutch policemen that were also helping. So I also try not to make the distinction like it's only sort of the Germans that did things, because the Dutch, many of them were also not really so good. But what I did try to do is they don't have names, they don't have identities, versus the people that really have a backstory, have a special ability. So try to really make that a thing in the game.
So you mentioned that you included real people in all of these scenarios and really try to match things with their lives, that you asked for consent from them, or I mean maybe from family members. Was there anything you had to be careful of in terms of being appropriately sensitive when depicting real people in your game who might have feelings about it, or whose kids might?
Yeah, so partly what I was mostly worried about at the start, indeed, like especially people who are still alive, or whose families members also already a bit older, who've never played a historical board game or like a modern board game. They often think of Monopoly. They think of potentially games like Clue, Snakes and Ladders, Apples to Apples, kind of the games that they grew up with, and this is obviously a bit more complex and evolved game. I still didn't want to make it a game with 55 pages of a rule book, but like but it is not something you play as a gateway game. It's not like, okay, you want to play a modern board game after you've played only Monopoly, let's start playing this. So that was, I think, more the difficult thing, trying to explain to family members who probably also never played modern board games what I would do, asking also for consent to make art pieces for them, of course, because I didn't want to use pictures. I thought about that. So I'm getting the characters painted in a way that, yeah, they sort of look a bit like that. But yeah, I don't want to, I want to portray them in the correct way, and it's sometimes a bit tough. So I think that was the main thing. And actually finding the family members was the biggest hurdle in a way, to try to find, like, I read some very interesting story about how could I get to the family members or others that are connected to it. Some of it was much easier than others. So yeah, I put out LinkedIn messages and things like that, asking, like, do you know the family? And then through some other people, I finally got there with many of them. But I'm still searching for my last character, because yeah, I wanted someone from current day Indonesia, like Dutch East Indies, to really represent. Yeah, I got a character from Suriname, and I wanted someone also with an Asian background, and to find that is a bit harder, because there were only a few hundred in the Netherlands. So you have to find stories of, out of those few hundred, that did resistance, and there were quite a few that joined the resistance then. So there were some stories, but I was also looking for the 5th female character, so to have a 5 and 5, division, or so, yeah. So that was more difficult, I think.
How's the reception been? I know that you mentioned before we came on that you just came from a local gaming event. What's the reception been in Holland to this game?
Well, very good, actually, which is sort of surprising in a way. There's some people that have potential issues with it, or have some trouble with it, but overall I think it's good. And it is sometimes, like, you always have people who are against the game, no matter how popular or big it is. There's a lot of people who really hate games like Gloomhaven, or like Pandemic, legacy kind of games, and there's people that really like them. So I'm trying more and more to see, okay, yeah, some of the people who are maybe against it are like, yeah, they have just a different taste if they don't like the type of games, if they're gamers. And if they're non-gamers, then it's usually they don't really understand how modern games work. So I had a very famous Dutch journalist who said, yeah, this game will not work and stuff like that. But he is the kind of person who only played Monopoly. So wow. He wrote a lot of books about the topic, and really knows a lot. And I'm glad I'm in contact with him. But his approach to these kind of things is very different to not understanding other things than books and maybe movies. So yeah.
But nobody said the subject matter is a little kind of You've had that pushback.
A little bit. I started with some Facebook ads just to understand, like, how people will respond in different areas. And I in Poland sometimes I get like these kind of like smiling or laughing kind of comments, or when I write Nazi, then like in the ad to try to see like what people think, they say, yeah, you should call it German, and then I'm thinking, yeah, but it's like I don't want to. It was sort of the Nazis that occupied us, and many of them were German, but many of them were Dutch, and there were also people from other countries. So I don't want to make them one, put them all as one group. So Nazis is a bit of more fitting group, and people more easily know what you mean in German, in a way. So they were sort of, I had some comments like that, and I got comments, interestingly enough, about one of the art pieces that I already got made and is already out there, that the tram is incorrect, like the number on the tram. So I spent 3 days trying to find the right tram as a reference, but then still some people who know more about it say, yeah, this would not have looked like this or that. But it's also at some point, yeah, like you can't make everybody happy.
So had you started work on this game before Zenobia, or did you decide to try historical games because the Zenobia war was coming up and you had an interest in game design?
No, I started already with this game before I started, actually, 4 years ago, roughly around the time my grandmother passed away. But
right.
I was also trying to learn game design at the same time, like trying to understand things, doing a lot of research. I think this year I made potentially the biggest progress on the game. So if when the Zenobia Award started, and that would have been my final version, I would have not got very far, I guess, because it was just not a fitting game yet. There were so many things that I needed to improve to really make it a good and interesting game. So yeah.
Who was your mentor?
Harold. Harold is my mentor.
Howard Buchanan. I heard of him.
Yeah, I don't know exactly how to pronounce his last name correctly. So yeah, that's why. But I think he's a great mentor and helping to try to help me with some of the small things, like tabletop simulator is always a tough thing, trying to help. But one of the things I do notice with the game, because it's so dear to me, that I have sometimes trouble asking for help from people. Like I have people help, but I'm a bit more reserved than if it would have not been this type of topic. I think like I would have said, yeah, okay, sure, you do this. And now it's like, yeah, can you teach me so I could do it myself? Kind of, that is a bit more, the kind of feel. So I'm not asking maybe as much help as I could, or yeah.
You sound like a game designer.
Yeah, what I was going to ask is, how do you think that your game has changed or evolved as a result of having it be part of the Zenobia process?
I think one of the main things is trying to understand some of the elements. Like, for example, we had to write a proposal, and that took me quite a few days just to try to understand, okay, like how can I sort of boil down some of the elements of the game into like what you're doing, and historically what is it like. Mechanisms are nice, but if you cannot really like make sure it sort of fitted thematically and historically, and I think that was one of the big changes. It also gave deadlines and ways to think like, okay, I have to try to get this element better, or I have to try to get certain elements play tested a bit more, so that I really otherwise I would have maybe been a bit slower also. So I think one of those things as well is important. But it's also difficult that for a game with multiple scenarios to try to find, okay, which one should I send in and which one should people look at. As I said, it's not a very complex game, but the idea is that some of the layer scenarios have just a little bit more complexity than the earlier ones. So if I send the first one, it's easiest to play, but has maybe the least historical elements to it potentially versus some later ones. So that has been a bit of a struggle to try to get right. But I think, but overall for the Zenobia Award, I think mostly trying to think of how do I sort of market this game or show this game or see it as a product, see it as something that publishers might be interested in, versus just making an interesting game that people like to play. Like I try to, because of the Zenobia Award, I try to put it a bit further ahead as in a way. I think that's
makes sense.
Yeah.
So because I'm a solo gamer, most of the Zenobia Award games do not have a solo mode. I want to spotlight the fact that you've got one in development, and I was wondering if you could tell us a bit about it.
Yeah, so I actually approached Carla Kopp a few months before the Zenobia Award started. So it was sort of a coincidence that she started working on it as well. So she did a big part of it. Because I've never developed or designed a solo, it's not usually the first thing I think people do when they want to make a historical game in general, maybe, or just make a game. Like a solo version is usually, I think, for many games an afterthought, unless you really start with it, I think. But I tried to find a way, okay, how can I make the solo version unique? I started really early on with just saying, of course, just play the 2-player game or a 3-player, 4-player, 5-player game on your own. And that's what I sometimes do if I test a game, but it's not the same as having some specific module for it. So I made a version where there is a second resistance group you're still playing as the 2-player game, just because the game works a lot better with 2 characters versus just 1. I might try to see if I can make a version with just 1 character, but many of it is based on you go one place, I go somewhere else. When we meet up with the right resources and the right other things that we need, and then continue from there. So you have this other resistance group with some special effects, and they're both helping you because they give you some other abilities, but they're also hindering you. The only thing is that I start to realize, like, yeah, you can just technically also add this to the multiplayer version. It's not, definitely not mandatory, and it's just adding more that you technically don't need. So that has been a bit difficult to try to really see how can I make it even more unique as a solo experience. But I think I haven't even tested this extra resistance group with other in a multiplayer game, just because you already have so many other people that you're trying to build a plan around. So I do think the audio works probably best as a solo thing, because you have like, okay, we have this extra option versus, oh, I have to find the perfect strategy with the rest of the group. So I think, yeah, I'm really happy with how it looks now. I still am looking always for more playtesters to try it, just to find, yeah, if it all works out, if it balances it correctly, if it gives the right experience. But yeah.
So what games did you kind of grow up playing? What game in particular made you realize that you were addicted to war games and it would be a lifelong thing?
A good question.
Or
I
games,
actually,
not just war games.
sorry, yeah, so I started designing games when I was 8 or 9, or like that's what my mom said. I thought 10. And in another podcast, I grabbed the board, but I will not maybe run out of the room and get it. But I have it here still, so my parents saved it. But after that game, I didn't do any game design for almost 20 years. So, but then as the sort of classical thing, I got some like housemate when I was a student who brought Ticket to Ride and some other gateway games, and then I started playing Citadels and some of those, and then before you know, I was like, yeah, okay, I like games, but I often want a bit more complexity potentially. So I thought, okay, I tried many other games, and before you know it, I was playing many modern war games. I don't really have a specific type of game I really like. It really depends a bit on the group and how I feel. If I'm very tired, I might not want to play a game like Terra Mystica, which in general is not really the type of game that I like, but I'm always, I think as a game designer, it's always interesting to try any type of game just to see what you can learn from it. Even if it's totally opposite of what you're trying to make, you at least know, okay, well, this definitely doesn't work for my game. So I think it's always a good option. But my favorite game now is Battlelore 2nd Edition. And it's a shame that there's no, I think at least it's a shame that there's no reprint done. They went another direction, but I think it just has the right amount of strategy and luck. It's like, Memoir 44 is still doing very well, and it's very similar for people who don't know Battlelore 2nd Edition. 1st Edition was also quite similar, and I wish they made more of those. But I like deck builders a lot as well. I play Star Realm. I think I have everything from Star Realms, Hero Realms, and some other deck builders. Vikings Gone Wild was one of the earlier ones I really wanted to have in my collection. But Battlelore 2nd Edition is the only game I think that has multiple expansions that I have everything of. Which my girlfriend had to buy from Estonia because this last expansion was so difficult to get. So they found it somewhere, dusted off, like had to dust it off. So yeah, that's
wow.
That's fantastic. So based on all of that, Mitch, do you want to ask what's becoming your traditional last question before we wrap up?
What is my traditional last question?
That they've all been colluding.
Oh, yes. It's okay to collude. So we know that you guys have been talking to one another, and I think that's awesome. And this is a rough question because you want to mention all the other 7 finalists. What game are you most excited about playing out of the other finalists?
Oh, that's tough. We had indeed a very nice day where we showed each other all the games. So yeah, it's really tough. Like I like, for example, Syria's game because of the topic of like women going to classes and doing all kinds of things in Indonesia. Also because it has a bit of a Dutch background, being a colony, which is not a good thing, of course, that it was a colony, but it is sort of closer to me than maybe another country where I have no connection with. I also really like a cars game because of the 4 different approaches of India that I've never heard about or didn't really research much. So those are 2 that I think are really great. But honestly, the other ones are also great. I really like to try all of them, and we're really trying indeed to play each other's games either before or after the award is finished, because they are all so well thought out and really, I think they're all very thematic. And I think if they get self-published or if they find a publisher, I think it's really one of the strong points for all of the games, that they have such, you immediately, when you even hear the description, I felt like, oh yeah, and you're doing this and that. It feels all very, very thematic. So I'm always really happy how, to see how many of them also, I think it's the first time they design a game. I tried a few different games and didn't really publish any, but I have some on my shelves that are still getting hopefully dusted off at some point. But I think some of them just making their first game. So it's very impressive what they've done in a relatively short time. I know that if I didn't start with the game, I don't know if before a bit that I don't know if I would have finished in time. The game. So I'm really excited about all of the games. So those are just 2 that I come up in the back of my head because I had a bit more contact with them as well, and they explained the game a bit more than some of the other ones. But really excited about all of them. I hope they all get published soon.
Me too.
Fantastic. And where can you be found online? Do you have a social media presence?
I have an Instagram that I sometimes post something on. I have a Facebook group that I really try to involve everybody. So it's Dutch Resistance Orange Shall Overcome. Like when I'm getting new art, I always ask people, I get so many cool and interesting approaches of things that I can improve. So I definitely, if people want to see it, I definitely recommend to join me up there. And I have a BGG page made for it, but it's also something it's tough to update all of them sort of all the time. Like Facebook is the easiest one to just ask questions. But BGG, I'm trying to put the art so that there's one place where you can find it easily and videos. And so they all have their own function. And Instagram also is a good place to have all the art shown as well. So where there's Liberation Game Design is my Instagram account, if I'm not mistaken.
Fantastic.
It should be,
All right. We'll put some of that in the show notes for everybody as well. But you can find me anywhere as Beyond Solitaire. You can find Mitch as No Dice, No Glory. And it has been great to have you on, Marcel. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Liz and Mitch as well for your time and this nice interview.
Anytime.
Happy gaming, everybody.